If you're passionate about lifelong learning, check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The foundation works to ensure all people have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and contribution based on their unique gifts and aptitudes. They do this by investing in social entrepreneurs who are transforming post-secondary education and business. The institution's most responsible for empowering people to engage in meaningful work that benefits everyone. Visit ckf.org to learn more.
Hey everybody, it's Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. And hopefully you know by now that we have started our subscription-based model where we have original content, bonus content, get invites to special events. So right now it's $2.99 a month, and as of January 1st, 2025, it's going to go up to $19.99 a month. So go to edupexperience.com, edupexperience.com, look for subscribe now to lock in that lifetime EdUp Experience founders rate. $2.99 a month, edupexperience.com, look for subscribe.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio, back with you again and again. It will be never ending, ladies and gentlemen. I will podcast until the day I die. Here at the EdUp Experience podcast, we're fast approaching 1,000 episodes and 400,000 downloads that feel like really important numbers to us, as we've interviewed a lot of people in and around higher education, including over 300 college and university presidents. And what I think is one of the most interesting times and important times in higher education is we see so many variables coming together. We see college campus disruption from the political environment. We see demographic cliffs and declining enrollment. We see post-secondary education and the choose your own adventure pathways that exist now for students to get to a goal without going on a traditional pathway, which really have never existed before in the way that they do now. We're seeing the value of higher education come into question. We're seeing skills-based hiring see more of a limelight as employers think about how to assess skills rather than just degrees. So much going on, so many people to talk to, and I can't do it alone. I got to have my friends with me. And I've brought one of those gentlemen back to co-host. This is his second time. I have a feeling it'll be better than the first. Not that the first was bad. I mean, it was pretty good. But with every podcast comes learning. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Anastasi. He is the Vice President of Partnerships for Rise Education. Charlie, what's going on?
Thanks, Dr. Joe. It's good to be back. We'll try to raise the bar here for episode number 2.
See what I did? Like, I just put immediate pressure on you, even though you did a perfect job. Like, you did great. Now you're thinking, like, I got to elevate my game, right? This is how we continue to elevate EdUp.
That's the environment I want to be in. I'm glad to be here.
All I do is put pressure on my guests and my guest co-hosts, and I sit back and relax. That's my goal here. As my guest is listening, she's like, "Oh crap!" No, really, we want to celebrate the work that's going on around higher education, Charlie. And you're doing important work at Rise Ed. Give us a quick update. What's going on at Rise Ed? How are you guys doing?
Very quick update. It's fun because we're off to another academic year. So classes are back. We run a consortium of colleges that share academic programs, and we're looking at, I joined 4 years ago, and there are, I believe it's about, over the last couple of years, we're up 2.5 times in terms of students. So I think part of that fun is you were given some of the stuff around disruption. We're also working with a lot of partners in colleges who had record enrollments this fall, and we're sort of the beneficiary in being able to work with them on that. So life is good at Rise. We are optimistic despite all the stuff that's going on right now.
Well, you bring up partnerships, and one of our great partners has a representative here today. It's a partnership that we've had with this organization over the last couple of years, talking about the future state, future of work. What are careers going to look like in the future? What skills are important? What kind of companies are going to be out there? And I'm, of course, talking about the Charles Koch Foundation. So here's who we have with us today representing CKF. She's Dr. Laura Demarse. She is the Vice President of the Future of Work. Vice President, Future of Work, or the Future of Work? Laura?
Either or.
Either or. See, I can get it right no matter, even if I make a mistake. How are you?
I'm great, Joe. Thanks so much for having me.
We've EdUp and Charles Koch have had a partnership over the last couple of years to really bring important people from CKF and from business and industry and from higher education to talk about what the future of work literally is going to look like. You are nearing your year anniversary at CKF. Tell us about why you chose to work at Charles Koch Foundation and what kind of work are you doing?
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much. Well, how I got to the Charles Koch Foundation is kind of a nonlinear, circuitous path with lots of serendipity. But
Charlie, she just used two words I don't understand. Did you get any of that? Circuitous? I love it. Laura, keep going.
Anyhow, I had the great fortune of joining this incredible group almost a year ago. And for a long time, I've been an admirer from afar of the great work they've done in the philanthropic community and certainly their higher education investments. So the opportunity to come and lead this work was too good to pass up. And I just feel really honored and privileged to have the opportunity to be there.
What kind of level set for the audience as the vice president of Future of Work? What do you do? What are you thinking about? How do you operate?
Sure. So we're part of a large philanthropic community. So the Charles Koch Foundation is the family foundation for Charles and Liz Koch, but we're part of a broader philanthropic community called Stand Together. And we have a number of priority initiatives, one being the future of work. And really, Joe, that was born out of a need to think much more collaboratively and intentionally about how we support individuals preparing for work. And we have seen a lot of really exciting things happening on the landscape, but really the central thesis around this shift was how do we create more opportunity for individuals to pursue their dreams, contribute to society, and move into a life of meaning. And so what we found is that higher education is really expensive and has a lot of guardrails and doesn't allow enough individuals to move into that pathway because it feels like a one-size-fits-all approach. And what we know from the landscape is that people want options and they want to have a better array of options and choices in terms of how they consume education and training, the cost, the time investment, and where it leads them. So that's kind of a long way of saying that we decided to open up a portfolio that really helps support a much more diverse educational ecosystem that provides a marketplace of more options for individuals to interact with.
Yeah, and Charlie, I'll pass it to you after this, but I do want to ask because, typically as a higher ed administrator, I was one for 23 years. And more recently, over the last 5 years, as we've seen non-credit pathways or credentials or certificates, whatever moniker you want to use around alternative pathways have come up, there's a general, I don't want to say resistance or a lack of understanding from a traditional higher ed institution that is engineered to offer degrees. That's how they operate. Net tuition revenue over X amount of years, retention statistics, and so on is going to yield me X. And now I've got to look at a student that wants something else and be able to provide it. Yeah. And one of those resistance points has been around, or lack of understanding around the model itself. Right? If I want to offer a non-credit program to a student, spending marketing dollars to do that on a business to consumer ratio doesn't meet the muster of this higher ed business model. It has to be done and offered in a different way. And sometimes we're not equipped in higher ed to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And so I'll kind of have two reflections on that. One being that I see a lot of really, really optimistic, innovative partnerships happening. So I think that higher education is responding to these market demands.
Well,
I think it's taken a long time, but I think that then it has now come to fruition and people are really thinking much more intentionally about how they can serve the market in a different way and interacting with students in a different way. So that's super encouraging. And we have conversations with university leaders constantly, and out of prudence, I'm not going to name them, but really they're very, very committed to creating innovative new models. So I think that's super exciting and encouraging, and we're delighted to participate in that. But to your earlier point, I think historically higher education has had very few degrees of freedom to innovate and create new options and create new pathways. And, there's a long tail on creating new programs and new offerings, and the system is just set up to take a long period of time through consensus and shared governance and distributed leadership, which are all great things. However, it leads to a lot of lag in the marketplace. So employers feel that they're unable to get the skills they need in the time frame they need it from higher education partners. So all of these contours have led to a place of thinking about their business model differently to the extent they can.
Charlie, I know you, in the work that you do, you know a little bit about some inertia, higher ed, the way institutions think, right? Operating innovatively is sometimes difficult.
I think it's exactly what you were saying, Laura. What we're seeing from partners is, how do I sort of at first try to fit what is innovative into a current structure? And so innovation tends to be constrained by the system, the guardrails that have been set up. I'm curious because we talked about this a little bit and call it like pre-show. You've had a unique set of experiences being in higher education, moving to Ford, moving to CKF. When you talked about, you're optimistic about some of what you're seeing in higher ed. Coming from there, what are some of the things that you did when you were on campuses to open up to innovation, knowing that it might be a little slower, there might be some really good elements of shared governance that are slowing you down, but how did you try to push the boundaries while you were on that side of the table?
Yeah, no, great question, Charlie. And during my time at NC State, we really, really thought about this issue. And what we came up with is not particularly novel, but really it was about trying to create an additional stream of income and revenue for the university. And we did that through partnership with industry, helping to deliver to industry a skill set that they needed. And we started to build professional development, learning modules, or just really around filling that need. And we found that at the graduate level and at the PhD level, there was enough of a gap there that employers were willing to put some skin in the game and really begin to pay for professional development to get students ready and fill that training gap that exists. So, and that really, in the training gap we're talking about is really around kind of soft skills, durable skills, strategic skills, whatever the nomenclature you want to use. So there are ways that you can partner. But where it was very, very hard for us was to partner in any way that was tied to a traditional curriculum model, because those courses, that system was really governed by the faculty, and it became very, very difficult to bring in employers and outside business interests into the curriculum in a way that was meaningful to the employer. So the innovation that I saw was really about operating outside the bounds of traditional degree programs.
It's really interesting because I accelerate to industry as I was doing, some of the background. I mean, I encourage anyone to go look it up because I was just wowed as I was on the NC State website and looking at job modules with things as specific as job search strategies and internships and practicums. And it was all the things that when we survey students, we're hearing, this is what I need help with. And so it's a bummer in some ways to hear that it kind of had to sort of fall outside of the traditional model, because I feel like that's what we're hearing students want. Maybe to pivot then to Ford, where I saw some stuff about how you successfully, while at Ford, partnered with institutions within the Detroit area for things like mechatronics and engineering and STEM. If you're a higher ed listener right now, what made a good academic partner when you were at Ford? What did higher ed institutions do to make themselves a really great partner to a group like Ford?
Yeah, no, great question. So we had lots of them when I was at Ford. It was really, really astonishing, the amount of faculty buy-in and partnership we had, particularly in the engineering space. And one of the things that I think was an indicator of a great partnership was just a willingness to jump in and co-create with us. So as we were starting to develop training modules, we wanted the external faculty perspective on the work we were developing. So really asking them to come in and participate in external curriculum review and reviewing the work we were developing to make sure that it aligned with what they were teaching, that there was just general alignment and from what we needed and what they could teach. So kind of doing that crosswalk. And we just developed really, really strong relationships with faculty that really, really wanted to create an opportunity for their students to have internships, industry-ready experience, exposure, et cetera. So it was really just a buy-in at the faculty level to oftentimes lend their time outside of teaching to this effort.
Tell them like it is.
Not only outside of teaching, but also with some an open mind for whatever curriculum I might have might be outdated and it needs to be updated, and that's going to take some work, and I'm okay with it. And then maybe I need to change it. Maybe I need to let go of control. You know, there's institutions across the U.S., and you know this, Laura, where faculty, quote unquote, own the curriculum. Or the institution owns the curriculum and faculty oversee. Sometimes oversee comes with its own definition depending on who you're talking to. And that's why I think institutions can get stuck in allowing innovation within the academic model. But as you look at coexistence, right? Because even if we can't do it within an academic model that currently exists, there are companies that are doing it, companies and organizations and institutions, and however you want to call it, entities, how about that? Entities that are offering non-credit courses, credentials, certificates, leading to a specific job or giving them specific skills, okay? That is clear, and they're happening outside of higher education proper. But, and this is a caveat, you ready for this? But we know, and you know, I know you know, institutions are not always honoring that work, that skill for credit. Right. And then it's like, well, I've got all these skills, I paid money, I have these things, I can literally prove mastery, and you're telling me I can't have any credit, but I want to get a degree because it's that time in my life for me to move forward. That's still a huge barrier.
Yeah, and therein lies the challenge with the current business model as it stands. But I want to just back up for a moment and emphasize the huge amount of mutual benefit here, that really the employers leaning into higher education and higher education leaning into employers, there's tremendous mutual benefit in terms of growing a workforce that's ready day one. So I think that's a really important point to think about how we can continue that mutual benefit that's so critical. But with respect to your question, Joe, you know, the business model needs to be reimagined. And individuals that have completed credit hours, who have done the work, need to have something to show for it. And so that's where short-term credentials and these accelerated pathways become much more attractive to consumers.
You know, Charlie, back to you in a sec, but I want to follow this for a minute, because alternative is a model. It can be pathways. It can be actual academic delivery or modality, right? It can be something like competency-based education. It can be non-standard terms. When we get so stuck on academic calendars, it literally still blows my mind how hard it is to transition an institution from a standard term to a non-standard term, or even offer something in a non-standard format. These learners that we're talking about here, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but you're talking about people that kind of know what they want. You know, I want to get the skill, and I want it right stinking now, and I want to have the availability to do something with it later, have higher education and an employer recognize it. So I see blindness in this double-sided marketplace for the student. Blindness from the higher ed institution who maybe not honor credit, and then some blindness from employers that still haven't fully embraced how to calculate skill stacking. Maybe that's not the right way, but how do I see these skills that you've gained, Laura, and think, oh yes, this is exactly what I need, and I understand how to look at this skill stack, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Joe. And I think there are bright spots on the landscape where this is starting to happen. But I think what I would challenge is the kind of binary thinking. And I think that this is very much a yes and conversation. And I think, you know, college and four-year degrees is an incredible opportunity for millions of Americans, and will continue to be so. And we support that. And we've heavily invested in higher education partnerships over the years, and we'll continue to do so. But I think what we're seeing is a need for options in the marketplace. And whether those options are offered by independent solution providers or a traditional brick and mortar university, there's an opportunity for them to participate in this. So as opposed to looking at a student through seat hours and matriculation, looking at learner pathways and embracing a higher education ecosystem where opportunities come in and out with market demand. So an individual, as opposed to coming through as a freshman and leaving as a senior with a 4-year degree and then going and starting my career, how about I interact with higher education in a much more fluid way, where I'm coming in and out with the needs of the market to acquire new skills to advance myself, depending on where I am with my stage of life. So higher education becomes a much more porous system that serves an individual over the course of their life as their needs change in their career or their life. So as opposed to thinking about a student as a matriculating individual that will graduate with a degree, how about thinking about students as learners that are going to interact with your institution, your program, based on their needs currently, and creating a system that allows them to consume that learning as they need in modules or in short-term pathways. And so at the end of that experience, there's a terminal pathway to a job. So
100%.
So that the time they have spent, they've determined how much they want to spend, how much it's going to cost them, and really where they're going to go at the end. So what I'm in favor of is higher education thinking about how they can participate in this marketplace and offer much more flexible, durable, terminal pathways to employment.
Amazing.
Laura, maybe a question following up on that. I know some of this might have to be on a no-names basis just to protect the privacy of an institution, but are there any exemplars out there of that porous model that you can sort of point to give us a sense of how we're breaking out of that mold of freshman, senior, done onto a new batch?
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly Western Governors University has been at this a long time with their competency-based models and how they work with students. Certainly the work of Michael Crow at Arizona State is, I think, a North Star on the landscape in terms of really what he did was really put the learner at the middle of the university as opposed to accreditation and rankings. It was really about servicing learners. And so the work they've done is tremendous. And we're starting to see it in other places too. So it can happen, but universities just have to really think through their models. But I think I encourage the leaders I speak to really think about their role in the community as not just a place that graduates seniors, but as a community center that offers all sorts of belonging and purpose and resources to members of the community. And I think when you can start to think about your work through that lens, it opens up many more possibilities to service individuals that are part of your community that haven't had an opportunity to connect with the university.
Yeah, it seems like even as things move online, that locality and that presence remains something that for an institution is critically important. You have a campus, you have a presence, you have an alumni base, and yes, that might spread all over the place, but there's that opportunity to even start to, merge different modalities, but take advantage of the fact that, this is not a knock against Western Governors, but if you're thinking about how do I compete, they're doing an amazing job nationally, but what can you do in your market that they don't have boots on the ground there? And so I think that idea of place, even as we're thinking about online, I know that's not a novel concept, but it feels like a really important thing to be leaning into as a differentiator.
If you're passionate about lifelong learning, check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The foundation works to ensure all people have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and contribution based on their unique gifts and aptitudes. Visit ckf.org to learn more.
Hey everybody, it's Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. And hopefully you know by now that we have started our subscription-based model where we have original content, bonus content, get invites to special events. So right now it's $2.99 a month, and as of January 1st, 2025, it's going to go up to $19.99 a month. So go to edupexperience.com, edupexperience.com, look for subscribe now to lock in that lifetime EdUp Experience founders rate. $2.99 a month, edupexperience.com, look for subscribe.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that, Charlie. I think that's exactly right. And, one of the great benefits of being around a great university, in addition to sports and the arts, is the opportunity to interact with incredible faculty and resources. And if you can think about taking those pieces apart and creating greater access and service in the community, these universities start to really transform their reputation. And I think that higher education for a long time has been its own worst enemy, with elitism and guardrails to entry and so forth. And what we're seeing is a generation that is questioning the ROI, and universities having to get much more clear and much more articulate about their value add and the value proposition. So I think a university that can take down the 4-year degrees and the 2-year degrees and unbundle and offer additional pathways for people behooves not only the residents of the community, but the university. They create new alumni, new streams of revenue, new partnerships with industry. So there's just so much opportunity there for the university to really move forward in an innovative way.
You know, Charlie, I want to just add this I was in an institution in Missouri, and most recently, the fastest growing university serving the modern student was Western Governors University, who has no presence, right? They just had a bunch of cars driving around. Not to take away the place, but looking at it a different way. The institution I was working at absolutely had a place. But I had people say, well, the students that are going there aren't our students. And I went, yes, they are. They're just not coming here because we can't seem to offer the basics of what WGU does, or the competency-based model. The CBE model is very popular. But for an institution, that's a massive shift to be able to get people to think differently. So sometimes location works against you because you don't have complete alignment around who you're serving. And I think that for higher ed right now, there's a really big question for institutions that have physical locations is, who is our student? How do we serve people within our region? And how do we go outside our region and balance that without having the push and pull internally of, well, those aren't our students, or this is our ideal student? Because then it's who you exclude, not who you include. And then your enrollment just goes straight down the tubes.
Yeah. I apologize, Laura. There's one thing that you brought to my mind, which is like we've sort of gotten on the topic of Western Governors, but I think there's something that's a bit instructive that we were looking at recently, which is the fastest growing segment. I was listening to Scott at a conference. The fastest growing segment for Western Governors over the last couple of years has been the 18 to 24-year-old segment. And that segment used to represent, I believe, something like 5% of the total population, and it's now almost 15%. So almost tripling over a fairly recent period. And what came to mind for me as I was listening to the conversation is that student-centeredness, that ethos of placing the student at the center. And what are those students liking that are 18 to 24? Things like flexibility and ROI and convenience. And it sort of strains it for a long time. We've acted like you start liking convenience and flexibility and ROI at 25. That's a non-traditional learning thing. Like, that's when people start liking convenience, when all of us like convenience if you put it on the menu. And so I think the institutions that can kind of get back to saying, what can I learn? Not believing I'm not competing. And competing maybe is the wrong word, but what can I learn from a place that really seems like there's something right going on when an institution is continuing to grab a lot of learners across all segments. I don't know, Laura, if that resonates.
No, it absolutely does. And I think really what that shows is an interest in the market from young individuals to consume higher education in a way that makes sense for them. And the traditional college age student isn't necessarily going and spending $80,000 a year to have a residential experience at a 4-year institution. So that market share is dwindling. And so I think, to your point, opportunities to consume education in chunks that are purposeful, that they can mix and match with the work they're doing, and kind of create a career-connected ecosystem just seems to be much more attractive and a lot stickier in the marketplace.
You mentioned that word purposeful. And so I know that in the beginning you touched on meaning of work. And I know that's a really big thing for Charles Koch. And so I just wanted to ask you a bit about that, because one of the things that we've experienced in our work at Rise is we'll start to ask incoming or sort of rising seniors about preparation for the workforce. And I think the sense you get is a lot of students are saying, I don't even know what job to look for. There's many problems after that they're facing and obstacles, but it feels like there's a sense that a lot of students are getting close to the finish line and realizing, like, wait, I still don't know why I'm doing this. And what is some of what you've seen has been working, maybe other entities, again, higher education, otherwise, to start to instill that foundation of meaning on which we can layer skills?
Yeah, no, I love that question. So really, our central thesis is that every individual has something to offer, right? That every individual has something to contribute to society. And the earlier we can connect people to what they're interested in or not interested in, helps people along that journey discover their contribution, and make meaning from these contributions. So if you think about kind of going back into even middle school, and opportunities for career connected learning or experiential learning or summer career camps or opportunities to bring career optionality and awareness to earlier into the pipeline, I think starts to create a much more normative experience around thinking about careers earlier and understanding what maybe I'd be interested in, and maybe not. So it helps, I think, young people and their families make better choices, more informed choices about how they're going to consume post-secondary ed. So, earlier exposure, opportunities in their community to contribute, to volunteer, to shadow, to mentor are all really, really important aspects of creating a young person that's career ready.
You made me just have a moment of internal reflection and calling out co-founder here, Elvin Freitas, because we positioned the EdUp Experience podcast to say that we're a higher education focused podcast, but we're really not. We're a post-secondary education focused podcast, and we probably have to change that and with intention, right? Like there's an intention behind that, because I do believe, and I know Elvin does too, that there's multiple pathways a student can take. Now, as we shift and we talk about the current landscape, we talk about the value of higher education. It's questioned. Talk a lot about presidents about this, Laura, and I say the higher ed. The question of it is of the value. It's being questioned. What are we doing about it? How do we message around it? But the consequence that has had on consumers, especially when you put in debt and you put in the value of a degree, you add in technology, and I always use this example, like this, for anybody that watches Netflix or Prime or whatever, and it says skip intro. Like, how many of us really sit there and watch it? And how many of us click the skip intro button? It's only like 30 seconds, but you don't sit and watch. So there's an immediacy expectation now. Learners, more debt savvy, smarter. The choice I'm going to make, where does it lead? How fast can I get these things? How fast can I process through this? And is it going to be a Amazon-like experience, right, that we come to expect no matter what age you are? Forget it. You don't think that younger students expect immediacy? You're way wrong. They expect it more than a modern learner. So the student preferences are changing, and there's this value question around post-secondary ed, higher ed, degrees, and so on. So what do we do? How are we going to be proactive to tackle this value question?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would add to that, Joe, is that, listen, a traditional college education is a wonderful choice for millions and millions of people, and it will continue to be so. Because outside of the academic experience, there's a whole process of belonging and purpose and meaning and forming yourself as an adult that comes through those 4 years. So that's a formative and experience that's very important, but it's extremely costly and extremely expensive. So that's a personal decision for the individual and their families to make. And as we create a marketplace that's much more diverse with much more choices, these other opportunities start to become attractive. But in order for these other pathways to start to become attractive, we have to start innovating awareness for what they are and what they cost and where they can lead you. So I don't know that we can necessarily fix the higher education model as it stands today, tomorrow, but what we can do is look around the marketplace and recognize that there's lots of choices, lots of new options, and demystify what those options are. Like, I think for the most part, people look at the trades and they think, oh, I don't want my kid to do that. That's dirty. Or, I worked in an auto body shop, so I don't want my kid to do it. And if you actually look at the reality of advanced manufacturing and acquiring these skills, you don't have to necessarily work in a factory. There's all these adjacent skills that you accumulate that allow you to work in a variety of different settings. So I think a lot of this is level setting around the availability of pathways, where you can go, and creating really viable, robust alternatives to a 4-year degree.
How do you talked about demystifying, how do you demystify the number of, how does an employer sift? Like, I did this company out there called Credential Engine, and I think they've cataloged, there's 1.1 million types of credentials. And I've joked on previous podcasts, like, my cousin Vinny, my cousin Vinny's brother, sister's cousin's kid who teaches a real estate course. And, what does that do for me? But if you get down to it, really, there's so many places, legitimate places. There's online consortiums like Coursera or Udacity or all places where people can take credentials. How does an employer think about this? And that's a part of demystifying.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a real question. And I've seen some really interesting work being done in the marketplace to address this. But I think from the employer perspective, it's very confusing. There's millions of credentials that individuals can interact with and consume. And it's really daunting for the employer to understand kind of the quality and the efficacy of all of these credentials. So I think there's a lot of encouraging work around kind of quantifying and qualifying and vetting to help employers through this process. But I think it's still early days and we're getting there. But the quality of the credentials, in many respects, the individuals that go through these credentials that are able to move into well-paying jobs, that starts to create this flywheel of normalcy around the credential. So we work with organizations like Perscolis and Merit America that really do provide high quality credentials that are recognized by major employers, but we need to have more choices on the landscape and in the marketplace. And again, as we get better at this process will gel more. But I think it is very, very daunting to hiring managers. No question about it.
I do like your bit, the outcome. If somebody gets a credential and they get a job and they're making a good living, that should be validating that credential. The reporting around that, or whatever R&D, whatever kind of data analytics are run around that then get repeated up front to the student who's going to go into that credential, are really important for everyone in the life cycle.
Yeah, exactly right.
Charlie?
One of the things that came to mind as you were talking, Joe, about Amazon Prime and Netflix and Skip Intro and immediacy is one of the things I was reading on the Charles Koch Foundation's website and some of the reporting is this feeling of employers that there's a lack of preparedness and that preparedness is getting worse. And so one of the things I was wondering is, how do you balance the learner's needs and wants with the fact that a company might be saying, wait a second, have we made it too easy? Is it too quick to get that credential because they're showing up and they're not ready? How do you balance kind of these different players in the ecosystem and their wants and needs between learner, the entity that's providing that skill, and the entity that's taking that learner at the other side of that credential?
Yeah. So I think this is happening in a variety of different ways. So what we're seeing are now industry issued credentials where organizations are issuing their own credentials. So that's a way for the employer to really lean in and create bespoke modules that really speak to a skill gap or need they have within their enterprise. So they're designing the learning and designing the delivery so that it comports with their needs. So that's really encouraging and a really quick pathway. However, they're really expensive to stand up, and it's a huge investment. So it's starting, but there's some cost constraints that are very real. And then we have other third-party providers that really lean in and try to work as a dot connector to bring in the employer voice and the employer need, and then connect to a third-party provider, whether a community college or an alternative solution provider that can literally do the training. So the process is highly interactive, it's fluid, and it's iterative, but we're seeing bright spots where this is working. So I'm encouraged, and I think that as we continue to create greater transparency in the marketplace around needs and skills, and employers begin to lean in much more intentionally to how these programs are offered and delivered, we will continue to get better outcomes.
I've always wondered why you see some of these closing schools, right? These closed colleges and universities, and pick one, doesn't matter. Why Boeing doesn't come in and say, you know what, we'll take you on. We'll become the sole member of the institution, and you offer maybe they're a bad example, but aviation maintenance, or if it is Amazon and you take over a college that offers leadership skills or leadership programs. Now I become the sole member of the university. I'm going to go in, re-engineer your curriculum, make sure it hits all the university accreditation standards and so on. But I'm going to put all my employees through it and credential them out and so on. You just wonder why that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will continue to see more and more small universities and colleges close, because small colleges that are tuition dependent and that have a small endowment really may not be able to weather the storm. But to your point around businesses acquiring them, yeah, I think that's interesting. But to acquire an actual brick and mortar campus is really expensive. And
it's like, do you really want the hassle as an organization? And you just don't want the hassle.
So, I mean, certainly you could acquire their brand and their IP and pieces of it. But I think acquiring an actual university might not be a particularly interesting business investment, simply because of the deferred maintenance and the cost of just running a university, which is extremely expensive and generally speaking, not designed to produce impact in terms of for shareholders and a bottom line.
Yeah.
What comes to mind for me is it's that small residential campus is a wonderful but messy bundle, and really good partnerships are about thinking about comparative advantage and what can I do really well that you don't want to spend a lot of your time on. And I imagine one of the core challenges for a small college is they've been developed and created to do a lot more than deliver a 6-week module that helps you figure out aviation maintenance or whatever it is. And so it's, how do you, within this big bundle, decide that you're going to prioritize for a company this very specific skill need? I think there's just has to be this prioritization challenge, especially it's like classic disruptive innovation. When you've got the core model, it's such a difficult thing to figure out how you're going to reallocate your time towards that new initiative.
Yeah, right. And it's ripe for creative destruction. Like, let businesses and universities come together and figure out how they want to work this out. And is there some mutual benefit to creating programs that provide a workforce to the major employer? I think it's a really interesting idea, and I'd love to see more of it. And I think that that's frankly the answer to a lot of the challenges and questions that small colleges and universities face, is really bringing the employer much more closer, bringing the employer really into the center with the student to figure this out. Universities need to work much, much closer with their stakeholders. And so like I said, I feel really encouraged and excited by what we're seeing. And I think we're going to see a really transformative system moving forward.
What's your focus look like, Laura? And then Charlie, you can take us home with the last couple of questions, but I do want to ask you before I forget. AI in post-secondary higher ed? Is it the semiconductor industry? Is there any kind of particular item on your radar where you go, this is an area of focus that I think is going to be really important?
You know, I am fascinated by AI, and I am, just not learned enough to be thoughtful on this topic, other than to say that I've started using it. I think it's incredibly interesting. I think it can be a value add to educators and students. And I think it's going to be a tremendous training tool for employers for upskill and rescale, and just the application of it, I think, will create a lot of new opportunities to retain employees and train them up. So I'm excited about it. I don't really know enough about it in the higher education space to, I think, be intelligent on this topic.
Did you know that Charlie's an AI program right now? In fact, I think I've overly trained him because he's asking way better questions than me. I'm going to have to fix my prompts, Charlie.
Joe, I don't know if you remember, but last time we did this, I was about to start an AI course, which I am now a few weeks into. Because Laura, I feel like you. It's this topic that you're expected to know a lot about. You're expected to be able to deliver that like cutting insight. But I've felt a little like imposter syndrome with AI recently. So I'm trying to learn a little bit more. And what's been helpful with this course, I would say, is it just starting to use the tools, I think, makes you more open to learning. And so I'm trying to find the little ways that I can weave it in.
That's awesome, Charlie. Yeah, cool. Well, let me know what you learn.
I will.
We'll have an AI powwow.
Yeah. I don't know if you want me as your teacher quite yet. In fact, I know you don't. But the question that I was going to ask, Laura, is we talked a little bit about forming those relationships with the community, with different stakeholders around you. And I think a small college, like if I were listening to that right now, I would say, I know that's what I should do, and I don't know maybe how. Or I've had people give me this advice that I need to go alternative. I need to diversify my revenue streams. I need to engage with local businesses. And if you were encouraging or counseling, knowing that every situation is different, does it start with just putting your budget behind that feeling and actually hiring a dedicated team to go out and be looking for those stakeholders? Or how would you counsel a small college who knows this is the direction to move, but they're not quite sure what move to make?
Yeah, well, I think that they could start even in a much easier lift way, and that would be just with their board of trustees or their advisory board members or their alumni, and really just start engaging people that are committed to the university, have a relationship with the college or university, that are committed to its success, that have had a formative experience there. They can be the best ambassadors of that brand, and oftentimes have relationships with employers and can begin to help weave and knit those conversations together. So I think that, like any good movement or any real progress, it starts with a conversation. And so bringing together people that are committed to moving an institution forward, those people that are connected to it in some way, some form or fashion, I think it starts there. And then I think you can start to play to your strengths and utilize your existing assets, which might be a really great accounting program or a really wonderful program in the health sciences. And you start to really find these bright spots and you build around that.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Laura, I want you to take us out. Anything else you want to say about CKF and your work as the VP, future of work, and then tell us what the future of post-secondary ed is going to look like.
Oh, wow. Well, this is the big shoes to fill here. What I would love everyone to recognize about the Charles Koch Foundation is that we are an organization that cares deeply about individuals, recognizing that they all have something to offer, that every single person should have the opportunity to identify, develop, and apply their unique gifts and skills. And when people have the opportunity to do that, it creates so much opportunity and purpose and meaning in one's life. And that journey can look different. It's not a one size fits all, and it's dependent on the individual. But giving people the choice to figure out their purpose is a tremendous, tremendous gift that everyone should have access to. And I'm sorry, what was the last part of the question?
Since you're the VP of future of work, tell us what the future of post-secondary education is going to look like.
I think from our perspective, it is just a much more diverse ecosystem where people have lots and lots of choices in terms of how they want to pursue and consume pathways to careers, whether it's college or an alternative pathway. So we think that the market will continue to shift in a dynamic way and create a lot more choice for people. And we're really excited about that.
Charlie, second co-hosted episode for you here. You did a very good job, by the way, my friend. What did you think about this interview with Laura? How'd you feel about it?
I really enjoyed it. And the place that I would try to put an emphasis on is I just love the focus on purpose and meaning. And the one stat I'll throw at you on the way out is I was just reading the Carnegie graduating seniors report, where for the first time ever, the desire to study a subject fell behind job opportunities in terms of how a student's going to choose a major. And I think that's a horrible reversal. And I think we need to make sure that purpose and meaning stay at the center, because that has to be the foundation on which things like job opportunities build. So I love that mission purpose. It resonates with me. I think it's wonderful.
Well said, Charlie. And you said you never get the button, but you got it for that comment. Well done. Laura, well, let me outro Charlie. Charlie Anastasi, everybody. He is a regular here, going to be a regular at the EdUp Experience, and he is the VP of Partnerships at Rise Education. Charlie, how do we find out more about Rise?
Head to rise.education.
Laura, I can't tell you what a pleasure and honor it has been to have you here, especially with your incredible background. You'll have to come back in year 2 and tell us. Really now, after you get through your first year, you're definitely going to know what the future of post-secondary education is going to look like. So please come back and tell us so that we can be ready in about a year from now. What do you think?
Thank you so much. I would love to. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate you having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, her name is Dr. Laura Demarse. She is your guest today. She's the VP Future of Work at the Charles Koch Foundation. And you know what you've done, everybody. You've just EdUp'd. If you're passionate about lifelong learning, check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The foundation works to ensure all people have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and contribution based on their unique gifts and aptitudes. They do this by investing in social entrepreneurs who are transforming post-secondary education and business. The institution's most responsible for empowering people to engage in meaningful work that benefits everyone. Visit ckf.org to learn more.
Hey everybody, it's Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. And hopefully you know by now that we have started our subscription-based model where we have original content, bonus content, get invites to special events. So right now it's $2.99 a month, and as of January 1st, 2025, it's going to go up to $19.99 a month. So go to edupexperience.com, edupexperience.com, look for subscribe now to lock in that lifetime EdUp Experience founders rate. $2.99 a month, edupexperience.com. Look for subscribe.